Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of GovInsider's Festival of Innovation event. Today, we have an exciting panel on cloud cyber lined up. We're thrilled to bring you this discussion in partnership with Elastic, who are sponsoring this session. My name is Amit Choudhury, and I'm a journalist and your moderator for this discussion. As a bit of a background to this panel, as you all are aware, there is a rising awareness among public sector leaders on the need to think and act more like private sector startups with the necessary flexibility that it entails in this new information age. In Singapore, there is broad-based understanding within the government that collaboration and partnerships are crucial to provide new age citizen-centric services that digitalization has made possible. However, for this to happen, it is crucial to set standards, benchmarks, and build cyber resilience at the national level. This panel will address how governments can establish the right governance infrastructure and solutions for innovation that is both continuous and can be scaled up at will. For this discussion, we have Marcus Tan, Head of Cybersecurity Department, Institute of Infocomm Research at A-Star. And joining him are John Lim, Manager, Nanyang Polytechnic and Information Security Specialist, Singapore, and Nicholas Lim, Principal Solutions Architect, Elastic. So Marcus, can I start off this discussion by asking you, what are the security implications of a cloud-first approach for government organizations? Whose responsibility is it to secure cloud data, and how do you ensure that in the event of a breach, the damage can be controlled? Marcus?
Hi, thanks, Roy, for the introduction. Okay, although there are many advantages of adopting a cloud-first approach, such as potential cost savings from not having to do hardware maintenance, having a smaller IT support team size, and the ability to scale up quickly, better resiliencies, and shorter time to app and service rollout. But however, remember that moving to cloud also have security implications as organizations will now have less control and visibility on the data as compared to when data is stored on-prem. So in the on-prem data center, the user will own the whole stack. But once you move into the cloud, there are a division of responsibilities between the CSP, the cloud service provider, and the user. So a typical CSP will have different service plans. And depending on the plans that you subscribe to, both the CSP and the users will bear different responsibilities. So for example, if you subscribe to infra as a service, anything below the OS will be the responsibility of the CSP. And anything from the OS and above will be the responsibility of the user. So if you subscribe to SaaS, software as a service, anything from the applications and below will be the responsibility of the CSP. Identity and directory infrastructure will be shared responsibility. And also, in all cases, data endpoints, account, and access management are always the responsibility of the user. And most importantly, bear in mind that even if the CSP have some responsibilities, if there's a security breach, the final accountability still lies with your organization. Thank you, Roy.
Yeah, thanks. That's interesting points. Nicholas, as the private sector practitioner who works with our departments on information management, what are your views on very important points which Marcus just raised?
I think it's also important to note, right, like it's inevitable that organizations are moving more and more towards the cloud. Like you look at microservices architecture and like the quick path to like a deployment, everybody is moving there because that's what CSPs is offering, and quicker like to market like for your information and services. What Marcus has emphasized is true because like whatever you're putting up there, you are at the mercy of people who are offering you the services. That's one. You also need to do your due diligence and understand that whatever data they're actually putting up there, is it worthwhile to be published? If you're offering like a very trivial service, then of course you do not want to upload like all your golden nuggets, like everything in the cloud, like protect where feasible and where possible as well. Like what Marcus said, if you are deploying your own VPC, right, like your own your private cloud, like secure as much as you can, minus the underlying like agents that helps the other CSPs to actually like deploy those operating systems. So you have a lot of control, like in that sense. It's more around like picking like what strategy suits you most for that particular case that you're trying to do. At the same time, there's no denying that you definitely still need to like do all your security diligence, monitor everything you can, and also like audit like where possible, just to make sure that your strategies are actually working like correctly. That's all I would add.
Yeah, thanks, Nicholas. John, how about you? What are your views on this?
I think Marcus brought out a very good point earlier about the control, the administrative control between the client and the cloud service provider. And if you do a scan of script kiddies, there are also script kiddies for cloud services as well. Okay, so you will find that a large number of them focus on that portion of that of the interface between the client and the cloud service provider. And I'm afraid I don't really hear a lot of folk talk, or rather people talking about that particular issue. And once you get your services on the cloud, the thing is that if I can use an analogy here, like it's like Superman, your underwear is outside. So once you have that kind of situation, the what used to be a very, very controlled and private environment that what Marcus referred to within your on-prem is now on the outside. And then what happens is that this added risk that misconfiguration may bring about greater impact compared to, let's say, if you have some form of misconfiguration on your premises, you would probably still be protected behind your firewall within your physical environment and stuff. So this is one area that I'm personally concerned about. And misconfiguration, has been there all the time. It's not something that I think will go away very easily. But of course, we can learn from the past if history is something that we can look at. So things like using pattern practices, pattern-based practices, or even AI. I'm not too sure whether how AI can help in this, but to help us to identify potential misconfigurations, and then what are the things we can do to also when we do risk management, what are the things we can do to mitigate the risk in the event of a misconfiguration and inadvertent vulnerabilities are actually created in this kind of situation.
Yeah. Thanks, John. So essentially what we're getting at is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is cybersecurity. I mean, and that is an important point. And what Marcus, Nicholas, and John, all three of you alluded to, is the apparent lack of control over the data once it goes into the cloud. So in this context, Nicholas, I would like to ask you, what are the best ways to deploy data fusion for public good and national security? And with, of course, then the follow-up question would be with the exponential increase in the scale of data moving to the cloud, how do governments maintain the peace of mind, something which Marcus again alluded to in his first response, given the level of cyber threats that we see today?
Yeah, thanks for opening that up for me, Amit. So again, right, going back to the age-old thing, technology could be either something really good, or it could also be a curse for people who don't know it. Now, I think today we can do things very, very differently. Back then, when we say that, hey, we have an agent for everything, and people frown upon that because it takes resources on the other endpoint. Now, as you move your deployment into the cloud, you fuse the data that you have on-prem going to the cloud as well, you will see a fundamental shift that your deployment models are now different. A lot of your environment now, in the cloud, is either a virtualized, containerized, or Dockerized, or image that can be deployed very, very quickly. In the past, if you take account on how you're deploying locally in the past, right? You have your policies that you define, and then you need to go and audit your policy and say that, hey, did this machine open up this ports? Like what John said, it could be a misconfiguration. But as you move and more technologically advanced, there's a whole new technology out there, like it's called open policy agents that could define what are the policies your containers are allowed to run, like which users are allowed to access this data, which API has the right rights to create your privileged access management to get which controls. All those needs to be in place. And that there is one other thing that I would like to plug in as well is, I'm not sure if everybody's aware, there is this possibility of technology to adopt this thing called like eBPF, the Berkeley packet filters. It also allows you to simulate a kernel level on like a Linux to actually see that, hey, I can protect my user land, I can protect and audit everything as it goes in to the cloud. So to a certain degree, technology is there for us to be able to implement that, prevent like all that things from happening. But nothing will stop, like what John said. If I fat fingered and misconfigure something, again, like everything is out of whack. So watch what you type. That's what I would say.
Yeah, watch what. Yeah, John, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I kind of like what Nicholas said. I mean, I've been teaching governance and audit. Policy agents is something that I'm pretty much looking forward to. You know, how do we provide assurance at the automated level?
Yep. It's there, John. OPA.
But you see, I mean, Marcus, let's bring you into this particular discussion. What are your views on what Nicholas just said?
Well, I think when designing a cloud computing network, I think there are a few things that we should take into account. First, I think you have to understand the data and the computing requirement of the organization, and also the needs of the department within the organization. And then subsequently, you need to decide on the security classification of the data, the decision as to what data to keep on-prem and what data that can be kept in the cloud. And such decisions can be based on security classification of data in question, compliance to local privacy law and regulations with regards to the data in question, and also to consider some form of unified access security policy. As people now may be accessing your apps in the cloud from different types of networks, different types of devices. And in such scenarios, the concept of the parameter-focused security is no longer relevant, in such an ageless enterprise environment. So the industry, I see that it's moving towards a zero trust architecture, unified enforcement of security policy based on user identity, based on the type of the devices they're using, access networks, application types, and the data that you're going to access, and enforce compliance using zero trust principles and least privilege access strategy. So this by doing all these things, it will help the security team to secure highly distributed, users, BYOD, bring your own device scenario, and cloud resources. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Amit, can I just mention something about data fusion? Bring us back to this data fusion thing. It just brought to my mind, not so long ago, there was this issue where in contact tracing for the COVID and all this information about certain individuals, where have they been, at what time, and for how long, and then them being used, and this data being used for a entirely different purpose. I'm talking about law enforcement.
Yeah,
I think it's a very classic example of where we use data fusion from the various sources to bring about operational excellence and coming up with new solutions to HO problems. But we need to be aware of the dangers of the increased risk of data fusion. So like what Marcus said, data classification and stuff. So once you have data fusion where you bring together data of different security categories, requirements and stuff, and so it becomes a very muddy pool of pond where nobody knows how to secure. Of course, the strategy of employing the most secure requirements over the whole pool of data, that will also place a lot of strain on the computational requirements and stuff like that. So this is something that we need to think about. I don't have a solution for this, but certainly while we focus on the benefits of fusion, but then again, how do we then handle this particular problem of mixing up data different data classified data rather. Yeah.
I think the inference is like it's true, right? Like the 1 + 1 sometimes is greater than 2 or 3, like what John is saying. And there's also like one inherent thing that Marcus touched about as well. If the data is from the user, we try to secure as much as possible. Now let's not forget as well the technology that we deploy is 0 days and whatnot. It's very prevalent. How many times do you question yourself before you deploy that as part of your development library? Is that library really reliable that you're actually putting out there? Right. There are two aspects to that. One, we can secure as much as we can. The other part is we trust the technology as far as we can, not as much as we can. But we also need to question the technology, whether do we trust it fully? And in the event it doesn't, let's assume it doesn't, how do we react to it? All right.
Yeah, that's great. But I personally think as far as data, government data going into the cloud, or rather, let's put it this way, the government using the cloud services to give better citizen-centric, apps and other things which help the common man. Genie is out of the bottle. I mean, we're not going to be able to bring it back into the bottle in the sense that we cannot go back to the good old days of big data centers in government warehouses and things like that. But having said that, we just discussed about the various threats, and like John mentioned, the different uses of data that may not have been originally intended for those uses and all. But I'm going to bring it to one step further. Now, in cybersecurity, there's this concept that you cannot ensure that the network is never breached. What you need to do is to ensure that if it is breached, the damage is minimal or the damage can be contained. So all these containerization policies, etc., these are all designed for that. So essentially, I'll ask Nicholas to go first with this, say there is a breach. How do you ensure that the breach doesn't cause lasting damage? How do you, stop the breach and then make sure it is, it's just a breach and nothing else has happened?
Well, I think the age-old question is first, how do you detect that you actually have a breach? And what was the dwell time that the attacker was already in your environment? Assuming that you know it almost immediately, right now, what you want to be doing is reacting almost immediately to cut off that source if they're trying to take data out. Right. And you also need to know that, hey, how did they get in? So also all those investigative steps to get to the root cause on how people get in and what data has been taken out is going to be super important. Now, what I really want to say is in the past as well, it's always been reactive. Yes, we assume that they're already in here. How do we find them? And there came about the other concepts of threat hunting. There is also one other way that you can take as well. This day and age, like I said, there are enough technologies out there to start off and say, validate your policy baselines, right? Your policy agents. The other one is simulate a user LAN, just to make sure that the attackers do not use the lay of the land, sign their own certificates, and create an application inside of the application to go out. All that, that can be done. It's already here today. So what we tout as well is we can protect while observing. There are enough EPP, EDR, whatever agents out there that tells you, you want to be looking for the ones that says that while I'm protecting you, I'm also observing how your applications are actually doing and how things actually are performing, and leverage a lot of the CNCF initiative, right? The cloud native initiatives on building your security policies, understanding your policies. So in the event that something actually does happen, right, you can actually fall back to a reliable way and say that, hey, I understand that this happened at the kernel level, or is it application level? Did it happen on a network level, or my simulated a load balancer level? You want to be able to look at all that and all in a holistic view. So with the open concepts, the open protocols that's available today, look out for that. Make sure that you understand them, and also when you're actually doing your diagnostics, your incident handling, or even a response, you have a much better view. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Marcus, you want to add anything on that point?
Yeah, okay. The question of what to do in case there's a breach, security breach, so if the CS, the CISO have been doing his job, each company should have a incident response plan, and cross your finger, they should have done many times tabletop exercise dry runs, to simulate to run through the plans, what to do if ever there's a breach occur. Things in the RP will be things like, how do you respond to the media, for example, who to notify. Of course, in the first place, you have to stop the breach, cut off, and then, do all these things as planned in the incident response plan. Yeah.
Thanks. John, you want to share views on this?
Okay. I think Nicholas and Marcus probably covered most of the part about the reaction part. Perhaps you can just go to on the other angle. Okay, is to perhaps one way to look at the risk of a breach. Actually, when you mentioned breach, right, the first thing that came to my mind was PDPA, personal data privacy. So, but I mean, I think our focus is on government, right? So if there's one role I think the government can play is to look at on the other angle of the breach equation, and that is the data itself. Can we recover from the loss of the data? If I can use an example like the NRIC, our personal identification numbers, documents, information. In the event of a breach, once it is exposed, then is there anything we can recover from it? Like the credit cards. Once the credit card number is lost, is breached, we immediately deactivate it and we issue a new card. Can we do something similar in this regard? So that we can then recover once, even when there is a breach, we can recover from that, and we can really minimize and mitigate the potential losses here. And this is not something that the private corporations can do about it. It is more for the public sector, the government side to actually think about. And I think the local government has done something there from my observations, my personal observations. So this is something to actually to look out for perhaps in the future when we move on more and more towards the cloud. In the reaction towards all these breaches.
Thanks, John. Well, we'll look out for what the government is doing. Okay, but I just want to take this into a slightly different tack. This interesting discussion. I'm going to start with you, John. Say, supposing a government department comes to you and says, "Look, we want to design a secure cloud computing network so as to reach our stakeholders more seamlessly." So, and John, what should we do to design this network? I mean, in a very broad helicopter view, I know it probably can write a book on that, but we don't have a time to do a book reading session today. Could you just give a broad outline? What are the top 5 things or 6 things you think that they need to look at before, when designing such a network?
I think I will follow what Nicholas, the rough idea of what Nicholas has been mentioning in the last few questions, and that is the policy portion. Yeah, knowing exactly what you want to achieve, how we want to do it, and then craft it up. Obviously in an intelligent manner, and something that you can practically enforce and monitor as well. So that's why I say I love the idea of policy agents. Things that can help you to do continuous auditing, assurance, that kind of stuff. I mean, for too long we have been relying on a traditional practice of regular checking up. I lived through auditing. But in the age of the cloud, I think this is something that we cannot rely on anymore. But the concept is still there. It's just that we need to do it faster, rely on technology. But these two things have to come together. The technology and the policy that we craft out have to gel. Okay, the technology must support that policy portion. Yeah. So while as a technologist, I would not discourage them from exploring such innovations. All right. So I would focus on that part, the how we gel these two things together. And as for the technology where Nicholas has mentioned, that can support the timely recognition of threats, attacks, or even proactively threat hunting. This will I trust there needs to be there and will be there. And as an educationalist myself, I would then focus on the part of suitably trained and knowledgeable staff to design this and maintain it as well. I think it's another area that is kind of let's look into is the area of maintenance and staff turnover. Continuity is something that of course we continuously grapple with, whether or not we're in the cloud. Yeah, so this probably will be the few things that I would probably focus on. Yeah.
Yeah, John, thanks for your response. Very interesting. But two things stood out for me from your response. One is the technology must be compatible with the policy, which is absolutely accurate. And the other is, of course, the sufficiently number of talented people who can do the maintenance. But I just want to turn this question around to all the three panelists. We talk about technology being suitable to policy, but don't we have to look at the other way also, that the policy must also be upgraded to suit the technology that is available? I'll let Nicholas, he's nodding his head very vigorously, so I'll let him to go first with this particular question.
Thanks for that. I mean, like we're talking about Festival of Innovation here, right? Like today, right? Like you can't say that, hey, like I'm going to write a policy that's 500 years ago and expect it to to stay true like today. You need to roll with the times, and even like our software releases, newer versions, newer vectors, newer APIs, right? You need to keep up with it. Now, the question or the trick here is, how do we keep up our policy? There's always going to be the broad sweeping policies that we need to be secure. We need to make sure our data integrity can be validated and our infrastructure always available. The CIA triad is always going to be there. But how do you design the lower levels to enable innovation, the quick go-to-market without compromising your detections and your preventions? I think that's the key. Right, some people take it too religiously, to borrow a word that says that I need to have a policy before I can do something. But if your overarching policy dictates that you need to already prevent and also detect at the same time, you're probably covered on a higher level. But now it goes down to the implementation level where John was saying that, hey, how do we not expose Superman's undergarments? Right. So I think that is the level that your policy needs to look at, not too restrictive to prevent things from happening, you're making a lot of enemies within your own camp, and also not too loose to a sense that, hey, every time something happens, what Marcus said, somebody needs to go stand in front of the media, right? That those will be the good policies that you want to adopt. And then again, like you said, we can find technologies to suitably do and suitably fit your policy, but don't find the technologies that says that, hey, I cannot do this, I cannot lock down APIs, secure APIs, I cannot even do proper certificate signing. Those are suicide. If you pick technologies that don't allow you to actually complement with your policies, I think you're trying to expose yourself to the media very, very quickly.
Yeah, thanks. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to the discussion, I think, my view is that ultimately, technology should support the policy. Okay, of course, caveat, I think the danger is that, if the people doing the policy are not tech savvy enough, so there's a danger that the policy may specify something that at the present technology cannot be be used to fulfill that policy. So so it's important that whoever draft the policy, the people should be tech savvy enough and to be and to keep abreast of the development of technology. Especially in this field, it's moving extremely fast, and hence what it means that the policy needs to be reviewed quite periodically. And remember, what is secure today does not mean that it's secure in the next moment, because there are always 0-day vulnerabilities and attacks. Thank you.
And just to borrow one more phrase from Marcus, right? If the CIO is doing their job, then I think the policy coming and it'll be more inclusive and a more understanding towards the business as well.
Yeah, John, you want to add something? Because I want to also put one point to you three gentlemen, is that, maybe policy should be more outcome-based rather than on how you do something. That is something I've been hearing increasingly in my conversations with various technology leaders in the government. Outcome-based rather than actually saying, okay, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, kind of thing. So
I think that is exactly what I want to talk about as well. Focusing on the outcome, and that's kind of another word for making business being the aim, the endpoint, and not the security itself as well. Yeah. So I do understand really what Marcus was alluding to. Yeah, so I just would like to add one more point is that the person who drafts out the policy should not only be tech savvy, but also be aware of what are we trying to achieve as a business organization, yeah.
Nicholas, what is your view as a private sector practitioner who, sort of advises governments on precisely these areas of information governance and policy making and things like that?
That's why, like, if we always advocate and say that, for example, if you want to write a policy that cannot be audited, like cannot be validated, and it doesn't make sense, like why write them to begin with, right? And we are actually advocating for a lot of like open technologies, like I've mentioned earlier a few times already. Like it's called OPA, Open Policy Agents. It's out there, funded by CNCF, which is very well funded. You can already design actionable policies. For example, if you're using a root account in a container, like it will stop the container from running. Right, like you do not want to say that, hey, like everybody could run root like on a normal user, then you become God on a standard application, right? So like all those are already there. Like we always advocate for like our good policies, but at the same time, when we run that, we also want to make sure that if somebody's trying to change the policy or somebody's trying to deploy without adhering to that policy consistently, that means something is either wrong during the development phase, or somebody has a blatant disregard to the policy that's already in place, and that could also indicate potentially like somebody has a malicious intent already, right? So there are already like a lot of technologies out there that we plug into, that we play very well with, and like we help to like monitor and secure. It's time to put that like to action.
Yeah, okay. There is an interesting question from the audience addressed to Marcus, but I think I'd like each one of you to give sort of your views on this. The question is, can you elaborate on what is tech savvy enough in terms of policy making? I mean, I think that is ultimately is a very good question. How tech is savvy here?
Yep, maybe, yeah, okay. Since the question is directed to me, let me answer that, or offer my point of view. I think,
Sure.
they say tech savvy, what I mean is that, first, whoever draft the policies must, have a good understanding of what's happening. Because, when you, sorry, Nicholas, but when you talk to different vendors, there will be different jargons or phrases or, the latest hot keyword and so forth being thrown, So it is important for whoever who is trying to draft the policy to understand the state of the art, where the general, industry is going. Because after all, you are going to get the solutions likely from a vendor. So you have to not only able to see what's happening now, and also be able to see 3-5 years down the road, because some of these investments are actually quite hefty. And if you don't, if you have the wrong policy, ended up you choosing a wrong solutions, it will be a costly, affair. So also remember, I think most important, the end outcome, the desired end goal, and also the business objectives, that should be sort of the top. And then you have policies that are drafted to support this desired end outcome and the business objectives. And then you have solutions or technologies that will adhere to such policy. So that at the end of the day, the company meets its business objectives, the government meet its desired end outcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. Thanks, the very detailed response. John, Nicholas, you want to add to Marcus's points on this particular question?
I do, but John, please go ahead. You sure?
Okay. Okay. All right. So I think being an educationalist as well, we have been doing training for various kinds of people with various kinds of background, and the word tech savvy kind of rings with me very well. Yeah. I still remember like 10 years ago we were keen, or we were very into training technologies to become cyber savvy. Yeah, but nowadays, because of course the current trends, right? We are seeing more and more non-technology based individuals trying to understand what is this cybersecurity all about. And the question comes about how much should they learn? How technology oriented should they become? Being aware that these guys have done their basic training in disciplines that are non-IT. Yeah, so to me, I've been thinking about this thing, and given the current requirements and scenario, and what Marcus alluded to as the policy. First thing, the policy writer, he's a policy writer, and second thing, he's supposed to be tech savvy. So in that sense, I would then look at this person as being able to be the jack of all trades but master of none in that certain sense. But then again, I must also have a caveat that this person must have that kind of a helicopter thinking that that we are able to appreciate and identify the key aspects of certain technologies as touted by various parties, and then how to then put these things together and have a ready eye for potential issues when these technologies are actually are put together. I'm a strong advocate of open technologies, and I think this is a driver for what we have today. A lot of things what we have today, and yeah, I think then the challenge is really to have these people, this group of people who can do this kind of jobs. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll probably just plug in there as well, right? When we say tech savvy, I'm pretty sure we're not talking about, hey, we need to maintain a strict old way of doing this databases, but at least somebody who also listens to the business, like what Marcus said. You can't be designing something from the other old ages and say that, hey, it's still relevant today. But I think we need somebody who's drafting the policy, keeps an open mind, and also has one foot on the best interest of the company, of the nation, of the department, right? To actually start designing and say, how do we securely do this? Right? I want to enable the business, but at the same time, how do I securely do this? So that tech savvy per se is, I would include a tech plus business savvy. So that way, it covers all the angles that you needed, and also can speak tech and understand which one is better suited for your purpose. It might not be just one particular product or two particular products. It could be a combination of 2 or 3, including hiring the right people to maintain those solutions.
Yeah, thanks, gentlemen, for your responses. But now, John, I have got a slightly different question for you. Is that, while we're talking about policies and writing good policies, tech-savvy people writing the policies, but policies can vary from department to department. Like, say, for example, an MAS website would have one set of policies, while, say, the Ministry of Manpower might have some other priorities in terms of policies. But whole of government, one issue that we need to do, there has to be a data governance, sort of policy, which is whole of government, and individual departments can tailor their policies towards the overall arching data governance policy. So I think when you're talking about public sector services moving to the cloud, we also need to look at the whole of government data governance policies. So, since you research on this subject and teach on it, what are your views on data governance as it pertains to using cloud services by the government itself?
Yeah, actually what you have mentioned is exactly what I believe at least in Singapore, I understand there's some foreigners here. They are actually doing, in terms of crafting out a kind of a whole of government policy. And I do agree with you solely, heartily, that the different departments might have different specific requirements, and that would be more like a kind of add-on kind of design, hierarchical add-on design. Okay, so with regards to having data governance to drive the adoption of cloud by the government, the way I see it is that even at its best, because of the high impact of government services from a risk management perspective, I wouldn't foresee that the 100% cloud adoption. Sorry, Nicholas, less business for you. But to really embrace and put everything in the cloud. Yeah, but there will certainly be a niche area and where certain things really cannot be put onto the cloud, and that's where the government still needs to maintain their own infrastructure, their own people to do those jobs. Yeah, to handle those kinds of data. Yeah, but by all means, because the government's business is really the population, the people. So in that sense, I would say that a large majority of the data would will be able to be put onto the cloud with the relevant technologies, like from Elastic, and others to monitor, to react quickly to potential threats and breaches. And like I mentioned earlier, is the looking at trying to decouple the old style data to make them become relevant to today's digital world, meaning that they can be make deactivate, made invalid in the event of a breach, and of course to regenerate those data for the relevant parties. Yeah. So that's my idea.
Yeah, Nicholas, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I agree to a certain extent, right? Like being the government, like you have a lot, you still have like a lot of like all those paper records and whatnot, like still in the vault somewhere as well, right? It's unlikely that you're gonna push everything like to the cloud, like what John says, but like practically on certain areas that you're offering services to people where you want to get messages across like people, like all the services like will invariably like go out there. Right, like in the past, if you want to go update like a bank book, you go talk to a bank teller. But today, you don't have to, like because you can actually easily access like from your app. There are a certain level of like government services that will definitely go up. But what I would probably say like maybe this might not age well in 50 years down the road. Like you come back, hey, Nick was like totally wrong on this. But there will always be a need for them to like keep like their stuff in the vault, right? Like there's only highly classified people that gets access, and only people like around the facility who are cleared, like you can see them physically, like weight wise or whatnot, like voice before they get access to that. There'll always be that case, right? But for the most parts, if you're providing a service that you want to get it out there, you want to communicate like your thoughts, for example, your MAS policies and whatnot, you're going to draft your foreign policy paper right now, but you can't say that I'm going to distribute to a newspaper to publish it tomorrow. Like it doesn't happen like that anymore. It'll still need to be channeled up there. But the policy that you're drafting today, do you want it to be like out in the internet before you actually publish it? The answer is probably not. How do you securely do that? I see like a very good mixture, right? Because like our government agencies are providing services. But again, like what John says is true, like a test of time, like it's proven over and over again. When you develop something like internally, you not fully publish yet. It could be like locally, and if that data is highly classified, like tactical intelligence for military or whatnot, you are not going to want to do it like in a quote unquote like a Google Doc draft out there, right? So just going to put it out there. Thanks for the plug, Amit.
Okay, Marcus, a quick reaction from you. For cloud services, we are looking at two-factor authentication, biometrics, and other innovative measures to ensure security and that the right people access the right data. So, I mean, since you're at the cutting edge of all these innovations at A-Star, can you share some of the things that you guys are looking at to ensure more security as people access the cloud with various devices, mobile devices, on the go, etc.?
Okay. 2FA, two-factor authentication, biometrics, etc. They are good for cloud apps that involve direct user interaction at the front end. But remember at the back end, a lot of cloud apps are still driven by API. And in this case, 2FA and biometrics may not be possible or applicable. And a lot of times, broken, exposed, or hacked APIs are behind some of the major data breaches. So some of the best practices to strengthen your API security will include the use of tokens, encryptions, and signatures, use of quotas and throttling to control how your APIs are being called, and the use of API gateways to authenticate, to control, and to analyze how your APIs are being used. So in A-Star itself, we are working on the cloud security technologies, based on the attribute-based encryption, so that you have a final, access control. So the work is still in progress. So hopefully I can hope to share, maybe in the near future, the result of that research work and development work. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, we are almost reaching the end of our allotted time. So I'm just going to do two things. John, you want to add to what Marcus says quickly? And Nicholas, after that, I'd like you to highlight some of the innovations that are happening for effective government record management and analytics and etc. like that. But John first.
Talking about the biometric.
Two-factor and all the various new technologies that are being used for security.
I'm afraid I'm not really in the forefront of this area, but one element that I've observed very favorably is of course the prevalence of reliable equipment that can measure effectively this biometric systems. And I think Marcus also identifies with that as well. I think recently I've seen a presentation by one of your researchers on this area, and very innovative homophobic.
Homomorphic encryption.
Homomorphic, yes. Sorry about that.
Maybe just a quick short.
Encryption, it's one thing to look out for as well. Yeah.
Right. I mean, quick plug on that. Homomorphic encryption enables you to store data encrypted on the cloud, and yet it allows you to do a computation analysis, on the encrypted data, and then send back the encrypted result back to the user. Yeah. So whatever happens in the cloud are still encrypted. So even the CSP, they will not even have access to the data. It will be encrypted, and that provides some form of good security.
That's something really, really good for the cloud environment. Yeah. Sorry about that, Michelle.
It can be a very tricky term as well. But, agree. I think the attribute-based encryption is going very innovative. I look forward to that as well. John, maybe Amit, if you don't mind, I want to pivot back to what John I mentioned earlier as well. If a credit card is exposed, you can change a credit card. But I think with this, right, if there is a way for somebody to say that this identity card belongs to the main attribute person, it can be changed a certain cryptographic key in the future or whatnot, and somebody exploiting the old cryptographic key and accessing your data. That could be one way that we look into protecting the citizen's identity, right? That is one good innovation. I see the other homomorphic ways of doing things could also help plug into this effort as well. So looking forward to that research, really, Marcus. So good stuff there.
Okay, yeah, sure. But maybe we can have another panel discussion once Marcus is ready to share more about that research. But right now, gentlemen, we've reached the end of the session, and they've got other very interesting discussions lined up after this. So a big thank you to everyone for this panel discussion. I think we had a great discussion, and it was an honor to be moderating this discussion with you. And I also would like to thank the audience for taking the time to listen to this discussion. And we but to the audience, do stay back, because we have a very interesting session which is coming up right after this at 10:30, a fireside chat on data-driven governance, which I think would complement this panel very well. So do stay tuned in for that. And thank you, and see you all soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.